All right, it's six, ooh, that was loud, sorry. It's 6:30. I'm going to call the meeting to order. TJ, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Present.
Ms. Harless.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present.
Welcome to our Monday, March 10th, 2025 Board of Education meeting. I'm Kelly Davis. I will introduce you down here at the end is Nikki Hudson, Board Member Nikki Hudson, Board Member Amber Epling Skinner, our Treasurer, Mr. TJ Cusick, our Superintendent, Dr. Trent Bowers, Board Member Stephanie Harless, and Board Member Jennifer Best. If you're able, please stand with us to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting?
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or changes to the agenda? All right, TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes,
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
motion carries. Next, we have visitor comments. Okay. As we get our sign-up sheet here, I'm going to read a little bit of our expectations during this time. So the school board and the administrative staff encourage and appreciate community interest in meetings of the Board of Education. This section of the agenda is designed to hear the views of community members about their schools and items on the agenda. Each speaker will be asked to address the board at the visitor's podium so that the speaker's remarks may be clearly heard. The speaker should give their name and street address and limit comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Consistent with our board policy 9120 on public complaints, we ask that complaints about particular employees be referred to the superintendent and not addressed during public session. We remind all speakers that our district values and respects all people as they are, and that our district is committed to creating and maintaining safe spaces for all students and community members. We want to remind you that we value public input and always appreciate when our community members remember our district's values, refraining from using harmful or offensive language and or sharing your comments in a civil and respectful manner. It is not our usual practice to respond to remarks during the visitor comment section of our meeting. Our first visitor comment is Jennifer Valley. Of our meeting. We are going to move on to the Master's Facilities Plan Phase 2 construction update with Mike Dingeldine.
That was quick. So thank you and good evening. Mike Dingeldine. We're here again about every quarter to give you an update. We're over the hump. We're in the finish line kind of look at things now. This year will be kind of the substantial completion of everything that we're doing. And it's really exciting. And, you know, we were excited to see the first phase of Thomas open up and have the roadside sort of impression. But now the things around it and the things going on around the whole district are going to start to complete. And we're going to see the benefit of all the thinking and all of the ideas that went into to this master plan. So I'm going to start with Thomas. I always start with the original footprint, the 850-foot footprint of Thomas, and that we are going into a much more compact footprint. It is great for the building. It's great for the internal circulation. But what it's really great for is all the additional things that happen on the site. And again, we have stayed away from a lot of the site work as we've stayed occupied in the building. But this summer is going to be a big investment in moving, not just in the building, but moving out and finishing a lot of site work. And so that's exciting, and it's going to be exciting to see it get completed. So not the least of which is the front yard will be returned to the grass and natural field that it was, and we will have the setting that the foreground setting that we want with the background setting of the new facade of the new Thomas. This summer, we are going to be getting into the driveway that is the drop-off for parent drop-off and bus drop-off. That will all be complete by the time school starts, and we're looking forward to having that sort of side of the building fully operational. In back, we are going to be taking on both the softball and baseball field redos. They're going to be new with turf infields and new dugouts and new press boxes and new facilities. You can see the student outdoor commons from this angle. You can see additional faculty parking. That is all coming. That's the last phase because that's where we're going to do the last bit of laydown and organization as the construction. The other exciting thing is we're going to have for the first time an east entrance. And this will enter into the fine arts part of the building, but all four sides of Thomas will have an addressable, accessible entrance that will be great for all the activities that are going on in the building. Last fall, this was kind of our organizational chart for the site. The red is where we're working. The green is where we're holding school. The blue is the student parking, and then we're using the front yard for some temporary things like band practice and staff parking. As we go forward into what's coming, I will talk about how that's changing for this summer. Here's the middle of the new front building. What do I want to say? Area 1. Area A, thank you. There we go. A letter and a number and a word. These are the connecting hallways that you can see behind us are some of the existing Area 1 that's completed. Those wood doors will eventually connect into that building as we're touching it with new parts of the middle building. This is our art alley. On the left is the completed Area 1. On the right is our new work that's going on. Here's the art alley as it's proposed to be looking finished. Excited to see how that looks and excited about all the daylight that it brings to all those spaces around it. This is the center core of the building. You can see the finished Area 1 in front, but this is where east and west, north and south will cross, and eventually will look like this. So we'll be at the intersection of the east and west entrance to the south entrance all the way through the student commons. Also exciting as a musician to see the auditorium coming to fruition. We got a little bit of a head start on it. It's in good shape. You can see the front of the proscenium and the proscenium beam there. You can see big accessible auditorium, 900 seats, and I will talk about the capacities of all of our spaces in a minute. The sloped floor is going in. I see a lot of good construction practice there and how that's being done. Good job, guys. There's the proscenium beam and for the auditorium, and we'd be standing a little bit behind the stage as we complete that final section of the building. And there's the look up into the auditorium space. We are getting ready this spring to start the competition gyms at both schools. We have spent a lot of time studying, discussing, debating, and deciding on all the details of the floor finish and the floor graphics making sure everything lines up with what we're expecting. There are some significant changes to the gyms that do affect the floors and the bleachers. If you look at this picture, and I think I'll grab a laser. You can see from the edge of the playing court, there used to be just about a 2-foot run-out space to where the bleachers started. We've increased that 9 feet 6 on one side of the gym and 5 feet 6 on the other side of the gym. Both of the athletic directors and all the kids we talked to and coaches we talked to said it's really difficult for spectators and players to manage that sideline. And there's places now that we can have scoring tables and team seats, as well as have a safe path and a wide path for spectators to load in and out of the bleachers. And so it did reduce the seats about 150 at each school, but it was something that everybody felt like it was strong and supported. And so we're happy to see those things happen as we go through this. There's some of the detail kind of things, that literally to the 16th of an inch, how things come together, how white touches red and how red touches blue and how they work together. This is a blow up of the logo in terms of, again, you can see the red and the blue and the white coming together, and even thin stripes of clear that help define the logo inside of solid colors. So a lot of work's been done on both gym floors, and they're both going to start this spring with that work. I promised this at the last meeting because I didn't have this information. The final new total capacity at Thomas for the gym is 1,563 seats. That includes the upper deck. And the new capacity of the new auditorium at Thomas is 900 seats. The new revised capacity at Kilbourne, the competition gym, is 1,443 seats. And the existing auditorium, which is not gaining or losing seats, is 772 at Kilbourne. This is what happens this summer. We get out of the red, and that's the orange zones on this drawing, and we get out and do a lot of site work. We start the baseball field. We'll slowly move away from where the softball field goes and start that. I talked about the driveways and the student drop-offs that occur on the west side. That will all be completed. We will keep in the green area, but actually this spring, we talked about it, we'll be starting in the competition gym before school is even out. Just again, running timing and running segments together and understanding how this all works is great. After summer, the first day of school, we jump back into our orange zones. We will still be finishing for a few weeks the competition gym, and again, a little bit of spring run out and a little bit of fall run in, but we will be completely operational in the green area. The natatorium will be coming to a conclusion, and big news is just in October, 2 months after school starts, we're going to turn over the whole area 2, which is the cafeteria, the media center, the administration area, and the renovated gyms, and all the green will now be in occupied Thomas. So we'll have just one small section, area 3, left of Thomas's new construction. You can see the ball diamonds will be done, the areas where the drop-off will be done. The natatorium will be coming close to being finished. And so October is a big transition at Thomas because a lot of work happens over the summer. A little bit of it trails into September, and then a lot of it turns over in October. So all the temporary things we've been doing to feed people and to have folks work is all going to be available with the exception of the fine arts wing. That's where the existing east end of Thomas, it's the last part of Thomas that gets demolished, and we'll be able to finish the last phase of Thomas. This blows it up a little. You can see completed diamonds, completed areas in the gym, and really exciting is the media center, cafeteria, student commons will all be done. And then finally, natatorium. Lots of progress there. Again, very excited that we decided when we did to site it a little bit further away from the existing pools, a little bit further south. It allowed us a lot more control of the construction. It allowed us to do it with a little bit less expense. And we thought it's going to get awful close to the road, but Nathan worked really hard on the scale of the building and making it architecturally compatible, not only with Thomas, but with the fact that it's a building that's much closer to the road than the high school is. So as you see it today, the brick isn't clean, but the materials are exactly the same materials as Thomas. The scale and detail works very well with Thomas, even though it's a building that's closer to the street. And it's completely, the envelope is complete. The area you see open there with the block is an area for construction operations to go in and out of the building as we finish the pool. So that'll get finished up once the inside operations are complete. This is the image of our front north entrance to the natatorium. And this is where we are today. Everything is starting to feel right and look right, and everything is working well on schedule. Again, this is probably the best view of a finished corner, the southeast corner. And again, just comparing it to the materials, the exact same brick, the exact same accent brick, and the exact same stone details. And so these will be a very nice pair of buildings on this campus when it's done. Inside, our 10-lane pool, very excited to see that come. And it actually is almost there. The excavation is done, the footings for the pool are done, and the pool company, Patterson, will be coming in pretty soon to start setting up the panels and the wall panels for the pool. And you can see our access point there at the end. This is up in the crow's nest in the spectator seating. It's also enclosed and ready to go. We're doing mechanical, electrical, plumbing things now. And this is the student training room, 2-story space, extra large. You can pass through the locker rooms to get to this space, but you can go directly to the pool from this space as well. So it's going to be great for pre-events, for our staging for swim meets, but it also is going to be the training center for all the student athletes using this building. Kilbourne. At the first, this was the easy one, right? We weren't adding much, we weren't doing much, we were just renovating, but we're renovating a massive building, and we're renovating everything that you can see in this building. And it's going well, but it's complicated, and thank God for the students and the staff there. They've been super cooperative, they understand how things move. In a matter of weeks, we go from one area to another area, and they're back in an area. This is a great picture in that it shows the 3 additions to the building. The music addition at the bottom, the outdoor student commons in the middle, and the wrestling room in the back. So that's the new construction at this building. And very excited to see this. I said, I think 2 meetings ago, that the ravine and the creek are the greatest strength and the greatest challenge of this school. That still proves to be true every day. We waited months for the Army Corps of Engineers to release our building permit because they have the first review, and it takes months. And kudos to Russilli. They have figured out how to keep all of the parts moving and everything ready. So when we're ready, this thing will close up about the day it gets its building permit, and that will be a miracle. The outdoor commons, again, huge different space. As much as you've had all that outdoor beautiful space, it's been pretty much natural. You have to step off of concrete to get to it. This is going to be the first time you're going to be able to have to observe the beauty of that ravine from the building and from internally where the student commons cafeteria is. The auditorium gets all new. It gets new finishes, it gets new seats, it gets updated lighting and sound. And it should be a very beautiful space. Even it already is. It's going to have a little bit more polish and pizzazz as we finish the updates to it. This was our 6 months ago guideline. We were working on areas 2 and areas, just areas 2, the orange and the blue areas, science and teacher work areas. Those got finished, and we moved into the yellow and green areas, and those are finishing as we speak. And we are moving to the first floor. That is a symphony of spaces, about 12 different areas that we're doing. They all start and finish at different times, but it is all going according to plan. So we have finished science labs, including flooring. I couldn't tell you that last time I was here. And they're all different. Biology labs are different than chemistry labs, but they're all brand new. Again, new lighting, new air, new technology, new casework, new flooring. It's all brand new. We invested in this idea of pass-through fume hoods. So the teacher prep areas feed these fume hoods from the back, and the students can get into these fume hoods when it's time for class to start to set up their experiments. So it's a really handy system that we never had before. All new finishes in hallways. We've replaced all of the metal demountable partitions that were a great idea 30 years ago, but they ran their life and their life cycle, and so we are now updated and new and fresh. Spaces that were already great are still great. They have new carpet and new seating. The best investment in curved spaces is doing the sound absorption on the back wall. That takes the creep echo, or acoustic creep they call it, that used to be in this room, if you stood on one end or the other, is all gone now. And again, all new technology you can see up in the front. This is the teacher support room, where students come and get different supports from different teachers. This is kind of like the cards room at Thomas. Again, all brand new and back online very quickly. And this is the new teacher work areas. We created 9 new classrooms where the old teacher work areas are, and these were center classrooms that had no daylight. We created this professional development area. Each teacher gets their own workstation, their own locked files, their own locked personnel cabinet, and this is a pretty exciting space if you haven't seen it yet at Kilbourne. This is where we are today. This is the old media center, which is becoming the new administration, so it's part of our switch, but we're working on that now. Again, we're going back down to the shell. You can see we're down to taking a lot of the finishes out, but also taking some of the infrastructure out as we update it and replace it. And our other big area, this is the shop STEM art area, where we're also doing some of that work to update those areas. New classroom, they're brighter, they're lighter, the windows are new, so they're more temperature resistant. They still operate, so there's more fresh air, and there's new technology and new furniture in every classroom so far. So this is where the complication comes. This summer, the green areas will be finished. We'll be starting or continuing in all of the red areas. That gives me pause. The only thing we're not working on in this early summer phase is the aux gym. It's still waiting to come online. The good news and the surprising news, thanks to Russilli, is all the green areas will be finished and open for the start of school. We'll be done with the second floor. We'll be done with a lot of critical areas of the first floor, and if I blow that up, you can see dates in there. Aux Gym 11/25, Media Center 10. I can read my own screen. 10/31, administrative area 8/29. Right when school starts, the administration area will come on. We are wasting no days or minutes to make some of these things happen, and of course, the last 3 areas that'll come online are the new additions, and they'll be a Christmas present for you on the 24th of December. So it's going well, and it's coming downhill, and we're looking at the last calendar year of work here. The site work is also getting all pulled up and put to bed, and we have one add-on project that we are bringing the softball and baseball fields here at Kilbourne up to the standards of the new work we're doing at Thomas, so that there is equity across the 2 high schools. So those will tail in to 26, but most of the work at Kilbourne will be done in this year, in 25. So we're excited to see it continue, and we're excited to see it work, and we continue to thank the district for being very cooperative on keeping occupied sites, construction sites, working well together.
Mike, thank you so much. That
Sure.
was a lot of information, good information, so that, don't hear that, but does anyone have any questions or comments? Go ahead.
I'll echo the gratitude and appreciation for how tightly you guys are pushing things along and moving multiple, working within multiple projects to make that happen. A lot of positive coming out of Thomas this year in phase 1. One question that I have for phase 2 that forgive me, and if you don't know this off the top of your head, don't worry about it. Is that it's a challenge for the students because they only have one set of restrooms in that long hallway. And so I'm wondering in phase 2 that is coming on, where are the closest restrooms? Like, will there be restrooms that are readily available as they go into
great
those
question.
other spaces?
So we tend to move restrooms, certainly in classroom areas, and there are some, but there's not a lot. But we tend to move them nearer the assembly areas because they need to be closer access to the gyms and the auditorium. So as the gym comes back online, as the auditorium comes back online, there are lots of density of restrooms in the core of the building, just outside the student dining, where the students will be going both east and west and north and south. So when the building's finished, it will make sense. It's certainly one of the challenges we didn't think about when we talked about finishing just one wing of the building. It doesn't have all the restrooms it should have given the number of students. And the whole building is probably short because we've taken restrooms offline from the old Thomas.
Yeah.
So, and they're far away if they are there. So it's going to get fixed, and it's going to get fixed by, October.
I assume that was
Yeah.
the case, honestly, just asking
But
the
it's a great question,
for the
and
confirmation.
it is something that when you
they're
think
pain
about the
points.
original design, you don't think about when it then becomes phased into different areas. How do the restrooms come back online?
Sure, and there are always pain points
Yeah.
that you have to go through. So that's very helpful to know. The only other question that I've heard, and this is a phase 2 impact, wondering how, in thinking about phase 1, is that the the numbers of the rooms don't always make sense. And with the addition of phase 2, will things
Right.
make more sense?
Same answer.
Okay,
We
very good.
didn't number it for phases. We numbered it for the final
Yes.
occupancy of the building. So,
Okay.
And again, the district, did that. The administrators did that. So they figured out something that made sense, and it made it building, understandable when it's all finished, but not as understandable
Not
when you're,
as just one.
when you're
phase.
halfway through the A wing and the B wing starts.
I hear you completely. Wonderful. I think that people will be pleased to hear that, and really excited to see the October date for phase 2 on Thomas. Do you guys understand that gives you a cushion of a month by saying October? We all want that. Everyone appreciates the value of a cushion. Is it looking like the end of the month at this point? Do you have a sense, or you just want to say, we're just going to say October at this point?
Right now, it's October.
Very good. I appreciate that. We all, we've all been there.
One other thing though, the room numbers are also kind of driven by emergency response as well. We've augmented by the fire department, police department, in case of lockdowns, for quick responses. That's how the numbers are for us in phase 2.
Okay, thank you. For anyone who couldn't hear, who might be listening, the room numbers are augmented by emergency response needs, and that impacted the numbering, essentially. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you. It's very exciting work.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Thank you for being here. It's great to see this update because now that you're working in the schools and behind the school, we don't see it from the road anymore.
Right.
So it's great to have this up. Okay, you talked a lot about things, the phase 2 things that are opening in October. Does that include the auditorium? When
No.
will that? Okay.
So if you look, the orange zone, the reason we can't finish the auditorium is the back of the stage is still kind of mingled with the east addition of the east end of Thomas. It's still there that we're still using for swing space. So the art rooms will be open, but the music rooms and the auditorium will be the last phase, and they'll be open later in the year.
Later in that, like towards the end of that
What's
school
the-
year, is that?
What's phase 3 looking like?
End of February
Oh.
of 2026, the black box, the auditorium, and all the music area will all come into play.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you again.
Okay.
I have very few questions. That art alley is really cool.
Yeah,
Like, I don't
we're
remember
excited.
seeing that before, so that's, I don't know, I just had to say that.
And it's outdoor activities. It's
Yeah.
art rooms, it's the scene shop for the black box, it's the black box itself, and then it's the STEM labs and the shop labs in the front of the building. So
Yeah.
they all have room to go out there and be
And-
creative.
And bringing the light in is, I mean, I know
Correct.
you've done that everywhere,
Yeah.
but huge. I know that you have a lot of experience working while we are in school and transitioning areas, but when you mentioned the cafeteria will come back online right in October.
Right. The
Do
new
you, do we anticipate like a smooth transition?
Yeah.
That feels like a big thing to bring back online.
It is, but the old one is still online, and
Okay.
and we need to get it out of the way. So that's why we're pushing for the October part. In the summer, we'll still have this, I'm sorry, I got to go back one more. We'll still have the cafeteria online. The minute this building needs to go offline, we won't let that happen until this comes online. So
Just
there'll be
hard
a
cut over.
transition, and I'm sure a few headaches, but it's thought through, and everything, there's not a day at Thomas where there isn't a
Yeah.
cafeteria.
I have no doubt it's thought through. It just thinking of all of the movement of stuff is huge.
Yep.
So, but thank you for that. And then in Kilbourne, we had a student feedback session recently. That we've had many, but I attended one recently, and there were a couple pieces of feedback that I thought were interesting. One, a couple students said that in general, it's been fairly loud for them in school. I'm sure you've gotten that feedback, but you're here, so I'm passing that along.
Right.
And then we did have a question about a plan for how to stop trash from being thrown over the edge of the outdoor commons, which is not something that I would have thought would happen, but apparently they thought it might happen, so.
Well, it's a cultural thing, and you learn it and you teach it. So I think students will get used to it, and I think they'll police themselves. I've had that question for every balcony, every rail I've ever done, and I've
it's
heard
not been an
about
issue.
freshmen going over it, not just trash. It's just stuff like that they worry about. But that's just, I think, something you have to teach. And
Yeah.
we did a new career academy at Southwestern, and they said, these kids work in shops and they're grease monkeys, and they're not. But when they got their new school and their new uniforms, they came out of the shop clean. They used their cafeteria spaces and kept them clean. They used their common spaces. It's a matter of having some ownership and
Yeah.
some pride in your school, and that's one of the reasons we're doing all of this.
Yeah, it looks great. Thank you.
Amber, do you have something?
Couple things. Thank you. Yes, this is also exciting, just watching it come to life. My questions were mainly about Worthington Kilbourne. There was a change to the traffic pattern, right?
Yes.
That is happening or was going to happen?
Yes, it's not done, but it is
Okay.
happening. And we have kind of a 5-lane thoroughfare out in front where we have all these different ways of buses, traffic, visitors, back of lot exiters, front lot exiters. They all can find their own lane and their own way out. We still have the one bottleneck where we think at big events, there's going to have to be traffic control there, a cop. But at most of the times during the day and during the school year, these new lanes will allow everybody to bypass each other and not wait in lines.
Okay, and where's that extra space coming from? Is it coming from the field?
We moved the band field, just tucked
Okay.
it tighter to the road, just so we could
Gotcha.
get that extra space out of it.
Okay, all right, well, that will be nice. My other question, and I didn't see it in the renderings, and I'm not an architect, I'm not trying to pretend I am. But when you're staring at the front of Kilbourne and you have the auditorium and that towering just rectangle, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Is there any plans for any kind of signage there or anything at all to that rectangle?
So there's signage just a little bit right over the porch cover, but I think that's a great idea because you have that wall facing the
It's
street.
just I've always
It's a
looked
great
at it and
opportunity.
just thought it's a blank canvas. It could say, home of the Wolves, Worthington Kilbourne High School, or just something. I don't know. It just has always felt very blank to me.
Right.
And again, not an architect.
And it's an
but-
opportunity because those fly spaces for the auditoriums are big and imposing, and that one's in the front.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it's
just
also
so
an
visible.
opportunity that it's a good idea, I think, to think about some backlit letters or something up there.
Yeah, just one thing that's kind of been in my head. And the only other question I had was about the natatorium. You had that one photograph, and I'm so excited about the structure too, that is the back room where they work
right.
out and they practice and they have the staging area. Is that going to stay this is just purely my curiosity, is that going to stay 2 stories? Or
Yes,
okay.
it is. 1.5, I suppose you might say, but you have the back upper deck where the spectators sit up on the upper level. That backs up to that wall, right in the left side of my picture. Those windows you see on the right side, that's daylight getting into that space. And again, they can do trampoline, they can do weights, they can lift things, they can jump. See
That's
how
great.
So there's
Yeah.
room to do that, which they had in the old natatorium, but we wanted to make sure to preserve it here.
Yeah. And one other thing, sorry. I had a marching band registration meeting at Worthington Kilbourne, and I will just share this with you all, that much of the talk was about the construction because they're all going to be moving over to McCord for much of the season and doing their drills and everything over there. But there was not a single, when they put the screen on, the renderings up on the screen of what the
Right.
band room is going to look like, everyone in that room, and there were hundreds of people, was just ooh and ah, and you could just feel the excitement. They're so excited for that new space, and no grumblings whatsoever about having to move or having to do this. And the band directors did a great job just explaining sort of what that new plan is going to be. But just I think kudos to you all for working with that group and making that work, and also just it's just going to be a great space for them.
And both Thomas and Kilbourne, the music square footage, the programming was 30 years old, and that's changed.
Yeah.
And there's more ensembles now, and more kids, and more people, and more activities. So the black box is real now at both schools. A much bigger instrumental music is real. There's a vocal room. There's a smaller sort of ensemble room. We just sort of latched everything up one notch and got that extra 4,000 square feet. And they're both very similar to each other, and they're both very similar to the state's design manual standards for music departments. So they both needed a little boost, and they both got it.
And apparently they have a sink now.
Oh, yeah,
and
sinks
that's
in
an
every
exciting
room.
thing for the band.
And bottle
room, I
fillers,
hear.
that's the new one.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So that was one of the things that got a lot of oohs and ahs. So yes, thank you for all your work on this. This
Sure.
looks great.
So Mike, I'm going to piggyback on Amber's comment because she mentioned that Worthington Kilbourne's band is going to be moving to McCord Granby space. I think that's one of the things that Mike touched on in this presentation that I just want to highlight. We are, for the end of this school year into the beginning of next school year, I'm going to be asking our high school students to move to many, many different spaces. So we've had some of that this year at Thomas Worthington, where theater has moved and our choirs and have moved spaces. That's when we talk about both competition gyms being redone, and that goes into the fall, which has impact on volleyball seasons that hit the fall, have impact on summer programming. Both bands will still be looking for space this summer. Even Thomas Worthington's band, which has the front parking lot, but because we're going to be doing the new drive at Thomas Worthington, I think a lot of pool parking is going to have to happen in that front parking lot, which means could be some impact to Thomas band. We're looking at using spaces at Worthing Way, at Kilbourne Middle School, both Perry and McCord Middle School, Liberty Elementary School, Evening Street Elementary School. So there's going to be impact from high school programming that moves to middle school spaces and even some elementary school spaces. And that really could happen May into September, October. And so one of the things that we will be working on as a communications team over the next few weeks is really just kind of sharing that out, because our high schools are starting to think about it. So it's awesome to hear like the band boosters are talking about it. They know about it. It's the secondary impact that people don't always see coming of, what do you mean you're going to be in my gym at McCord all, right? So I'm super excited about where construction is going and really the timeline. This summer is going to be our big lift,
Right.
For the whole district. The good news is most of Worthington Kilbourne High School is going to be complete by January of next year. And then Thomas in the next 6 months after that. So not totally complete, but most.
Right.
So we can really begin to see the end in sight. But there's a lot coming. So, all right, Ms. Davis, sorry.
Amber, did you have anything else to add? I wanted to make sure you were good. Well, Dr. Bauer stole a little bit of my thunder. It's okay. I was curious about when you talked about spring in the main gym and if that affects any spring sports. So does that affect spring volleyball?
That's a good
Well, I don't have the exact date. Obviously, spring volleyball has started now. It probably will depend on how far they advance into May.
Just curious.
So the competition gyms and the aux gyms are separate. So
Right.
one will be available and one isn't. And we'll have the aux gym done by November, but you're right, the fall sports will be affected by that. But we'll take the competition gym offline a little bit and pretty late in the spring, close to the end of the school year, but the aux gym will be untouched for that period of time.
Okay. I have another question about the natatorium, similar to what Amber was saying about Kilbourne. So when you see the pictures, when I drove by it the other day, I was like, that's the back of a building. And it looks like a back of a building. And so I'm just wondering, is there anything that's, I don't know architecture terms. I don't know, I'm not even going to pretend.
Right.
Or will it remain?
Part of that is the unfinished opening. Once that's all done and you see the 1-story, the 2-story layers start to come together, and we have glass in the windows, I think it'll start to feel more like the front and back are the same.
Okay.
It doesn't have a lot of penetrations, and we do get the big letter signage up on the top. I think it will be like this on both the front and the back, Worthington Auditorium.
Gotcha.
And you
Okay.
see the mullions in the windows, and you see the dark bronze doors. It should help it punch a little more. And once it's clean, you'll see the contrast between the light brick and the dark brick, just like the picture of. It'll be way more like that.
Okay.
In terms of its articulation.
That's helpful.
It is.
Character. That's what I'm looking, giving it some character as you
Yeah.
are driving down 161. My other question is about, I think it was the slide that you had about the auditorium seating and the gymnasium seating. And you have accessibility seating there for
Yes.
both locations. And for Thomas, the gym seating has more seats, but less accessible seating than Kilbourne. And I was just curious as to. what
That's
that-
actually a great question. The upstairs balcony at Thomas is much bigger, and it's not considered accessible at all. So the percentage of accessible seats you need is
Okay.
based on the lower levels.
Okay,
So Thomas actually needs a couple less handicap seats than Kilbourne does.
okay,
Because Kilbourne's balcony is pretty small.
gotcha. Thank you. That was helpful. That's the only questions that I have. Does anyone have any follow-up questions before we move on? We really appreciate you being here
Absolutely.
and taking time to come and explain, and just like, it's just really amazing to see this start from an idea to now we're like in it, living it, and I will
We're down
say
the chute now.
student feedback has been fairly positive, I would say, at the student feedback session, so that's been really helpful too. So thank you so much. Thank you all for being here for that.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to transition into our second reading of Neola policy updates and miscellaneous policies. I'm going to turn it over to the policy committee.
Thank you. I think that the best way to approach this is actually just to go around the table to answer any questions people have on version number 2. Most of them did not change, but there were some that we discussed changes to, and I know some that we discussed at length. So does anyone want to jump in with questions or comments? We can start anywhere. And that's just assuming that there are some. Jennifer, anything on your end?
I mean, could we just quickly go over what changed? I mean, I tried to look through this, and it just seemed like the changes were things we discussed.
They were all things that we discussed. The only
Yes.
thing that we haven't discussed, and I think warrants definitely a discussion tonight to make sure that we're all aligned, is policy number, yes,
5223.
you guys just said it and I'm still, 5223.
223,
Release
yeah.
time for religious instruction.
And
So
it
everything.
looked to me to be the same as what we
There is one
discussed.
There are a couple changes.
Yes.
Well, yeah, but we
There's
didn't
some
discuss all of
additions.
the language.
So the piece that was added was around, in this one, that was not in the last, was around making sure that they had,
Policy violations
no,
addressed.
that, yes, that and, it's Monday.
Certificate of liability
That one,
insurance?
yep, so
Yep.
there's liability insurance language added, and then the language about, that gives what happens if they fail to do something within the policy, which was, some of that language was there, we changed it a little bit and moved it to its own section, so that it was clear that it applied to the whole policy.
Yeah, previously it had been, the recommended language from Neola had only addressed policy violations connected to like not bringing back trinkets and food and things like that. And we had discussed that we felt like we needed to provide guidance as to if
It was
any of the
it was
other
confusing,
requirements
yeah.
of the policy were violated, how it would be handled.
It was, I'm not even sure if it might have been, it might have supposed to have applied to everything, but I think adding it in its own section, at least from my perspective, makes it clear that
Very
it is
clear.
just policy violations, this is what happens.
The one thing that I did look at for this particular, I didn't have any questions about the other policy updates. I was okay with the provisions that were applied that we discussed at the last meeting. This one is under transportation of students on the first page. And we didn't talk about this last time, but it just kind of jumped out at me this time. It says, I'm going to say, transportation of students to and from the instruction time is the complete responsibility of the sponsoring entity, the parent, guardian, and this says and/or student. And I'm thinking we need to strike that because we don't,
Yeah,
this is for elementary level students, so they're not driving.
yeah.
And we're not going to have.
But
them
it's
walk
not
there.
necessarily, it can apply to any of our students. That's pursuant to the
Oh, that's right. We're
statute.
just not,
So-
we're just not adopting, that's right. We're just not adopting the option to have credit.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, so we have to leave that in regardless.
Yeah,
correct.
Even if we're not taking
We
that
do,
option.
this
Okay.
is not something we need to do now. We should just flag it because we can do this later. But we should make that parent guardian language consistent as we discussed previously.
I think that we could adopt it with the caveat that that is consistent with how we defined it in the, in our policy. I don't think there's any reason why. Like, or actually, we're also passing the
That's why, yeah,
cleanup.
that's what
There
I'm
we go.
saying. So it's fine. We
Yes,
can
we're
clean it up
passing
later.
the
I
cleanup.
just wanted to
Okay.
flag that. I hadn't caught that until we read it out loud.
Yep. So the only thing that, well, actually, I'll let any other questions or.
There was I think, on the, and this is my miss because I didn't catch it when we went back through the changes from the last meeting, but in the section where we talk about the background checks and liability insurance, there's duplicate language on that blue section under the liability insurance that we just need to strike. The district shall not release students to a private entity for religious sorry, I'm on page 2 of 3, I apologize.
And then the blue section, correct?
Yes, the district shall not release students to a private entity for religious instruction release time if the entity fails to provide a certificate of liability insurance, period, and then the rest was just accidentally pulled down from the previous paragraph because we've already covered background checks in that paragraph above. So we just need to delete that end of that sentence in the next sentence.
Because it's provided.
Because it's already
addressed in the.
It's addressed in the,
paragraph above.
right. So
Yep.
we were really
Good catch.
struggling with how to phrase that about the background checks and the liability insurance consistently, and I think it just was a
Yep,
copy and paste error.
yep.
So we're saying that any entity who violates any of this policy is going to first see a documented warning, and then a second violation will result in a 1-year suspension. So I guess my question is about the documented warning. Who's doing that? Who's tracking that? Who's following up on that? Like, whose job is that?
Administrations.
Of the individual schools, of the district?
I think that's for Dr. Bowers to decide, but yes.
And then, did we have anything in here? I apologize, I kind of got lost in the highlights a little bit with some of these, and this was one of them. Did we have anything in here about the absences, or did we kind of resolve that at the last meeting, that it wasn't a big thing?
So it's interesting. I think we resolved it.
I thought we did too.
Yeah.
Based on what we were talking about at the elementary level.
Mm-hmm.
I think if and when this expands, we need to revisit it, but we just don't know what that's gonna look like, and I don't think
I thought
we can
that's where we
policy
landed
our
as
way
well.
out of it right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so then the frequency is not, is it in here?
It is, it's at the top of 2 of 3, the first green highlighted section.
Okay.
And this is the section that I feel like we talked most about last time.
So right now it says no more, okay, so this is the same
Yep.
as it was in reading 1 and in the policy that we rescinded. So that it's one day per week.
With the caveat that we're not going to allow them to remove students on state and district testing days.
Yeah. And so I will just throw out there that I believe, we removed this policy previously because what we heard from our community and from our teachers was that it was disruptive. And I like the, the addition that has been made regarding test days because it's an educationally sound reason for not allowing them to go. Not proposing once a year, as Brenner was like, well, even if someone did that, right, it would be compliant, because that's not educationally sound. I do believe that we can support that it's educationally sound if we were to say one day every other week, because we as a district have already acknowledged that it was disruptive one day a week. And that combined with the additional restrictions that have been put on it related to trinkets, related to ensuring that they meet and comply with insurance requirements, liability requirements, and whatnot, puts us in a place that we talked about wanting to get to when we withdrew it the first time. We said we don't want it to be disruptive, and we want additional, I forget what terminology we use, but essentially not restrictions, but guardrails. There we go. Guardrails that ensure that we're doing everything that we can to minimize disruption and ensure our students' safety. So I'll just toss that out for discussion. And then if you don't feel comfortable with once every other week, will you all articulate why you don't feel like that is, in understanding I'm just throwing out this at you right now, because this is what we have to do, everyone, right? Like this is where we have to have this discussion. Why you don't feel like that's educationally defensible?
So I've been thinking a lot about this. So I think my question of just thinking about like, what does this look like, and trying to like, what does this look like for the teachers, and what is anything? What does once a month look like? What is you know what I mean? So I think my question would be like, can we play it out as a group? If we did that, which I think is defensible, I don't disagree with you. My concern there, just from my perspective, is that we place an onus of responsibility on the teachers to keep track of when they're there and when because do you know what I mean? Like if it's every week, it's like every week and it's this day. And I'm not discounting what you're saying at all. I'm just explaining like it's predictable. And so when we do less predictable cadences, my only concern is that it does become a traceability issue from the teacher. It becomes an issue of like, do we have to create policy that says, but if you miss your week because of spring break, then you don't get to redo it, or do we make do you know what I mean? Like there's a whole, I feel like it goes into a lot of caveats. So I kind of, maybe that's worth discussing. I don't know what that looks like, or if we think that's crazy.
I think that's a good point in terms of the policy should be clear on maybe that. If it's once a month or once every other month or whatever it is, do we articulate that in the policy? Saying that on the first Monday or the first Tuesday, or, I don't know if that's too limiting to these different groups that might be coming in and, they want to have the flexibility, but it's an interesting thought.
Or if they miss it because of their
Stephanie,
testing day or whatever.
I'm sorry.
No,
What were you saying?
No, I said, or if it's a testing day, you know what I mean? Like there's all these ifs, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that I hear you, and I think that I think that our teachers navigate a lot and our principals navigate a lot, and that for the sake of minimizing disruption, giving them the option or the chance to do it once every other week, and to be able to navigate that just doesn't, when I think about our, the most parent to parent elementary age, related arts is one that, like, we're always like, is it A day, is it B day, is it C day, or is it, what, you know what I mean? Like that to me was like the hardest thing to keep track of. If someone can keep track of Related Arts Day and what day it is, they sure as heck can keep track of whether it's the on day or the off day for RTRI, or week, excuse me. So, so I hear you, and I would just hate to minimize, to miss an opportunities to minimize disruption for the sake of a what if or a can our administrators handle this? I mean, we can
Oh, I think they
pause on-
can. Let me be clear. I think they can, for sure, no question. I think they can. I think my question is more, we ask them to do so much. Is this putting another thing on their plate? That's more of my question, not can they? I know they can.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to say that you were saying that, you know what I mean? I hear you. I didn't mean to phrase it like
Yeah,
they
I
wouldn't
wanted-
be able to. And at the same time, like, this law already requires them to do more. So there's a couple ways to look at it, right? This is one less day, 2 less days in a month when kids are coming through and signing themselves out of that kiosk in the office every single day. 2 less days of the month where teachers are putting kids' coats on little kids, making sure that everyone's who's supposed to go is ready, walking them down the hallway. Like the things that our legislators are saying, which as far as like, well, you know, shouldn't be a burden on schools, no school time, we all know is not feasible with elementary schools. So I feel like that's a reasonable pro and con of like, okay, we're gonna have to remember what week it is versus all the effort and energy that goes into rallying those kids, taking those kids down to the office, having those kids check themselves out, check themselves back in, and introducing them back into the classroom.
So my comment, well, first off, I wasn't part of the policy committee, so the once every other week wasn't even on my radar because it's not one of the choices.
I think this is new to
here.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
Neola
new, but-
is just
I know part of
suggestions.
our issue is being disruptive, and to me, it seems like every other week is more disruptive to have to remember. And I'll go to the example of my Rotary Club that used to be every Wednesday. Everybody knew Wednesday we have Rotary. Now it's twice a month. Every Wednesday, I get calls, the president gets calls. Is it a meeting week or not a meeting week? And what's going on? And the president's sending out emails. It's very disruptive. It would be easier just to go every week than try to remember what the 2 meetings a week are. So I don't know if it's stopping the disruption. And I mean, my other question is, I know it was reviewed by our attorney, and I got the feeling she thought the intent of the law was fairly regular.
Which, no,
So-
what she said was that it needs to be defensible, needs to be educationally defensible. That's why I use that language. And yeah, she said, you know, choosing one day a year is
It's
not
not,
educationally
right.
defensible. And so why Brenner said, well, you could do this and comply, we all know that that's going to result in, you know, additional legislation. So it's somewhere in between there. And the question is, what do we as a district view as educationally defensible, which is why I went back to the fact that we rescinded this policy because it was disruptive at once a week. Do we think once a month is educationally defensible? I didn't come out with that. I came out of the gate with a once every other week so that we're meeting, you know, somewhere in the middle where this board feels like they're comfortable and they're not potentially, you know, I don't want to say it that way. I was going to say something and it would have come out wrong. And that they're still speaking the same language as we were last fall when we rescinded the policy.
Right, and when we rescinded the policy, it wasn't the law, and now it's the law, so we have to have it.
Oh, absolutely.
And I just, from my experience, I feel that every other week is disruptive and a challenge.
What are your thoughts on every once a month?
I think that's going against the intent of the law. I think we'd have Andrew Brenner coming to our meeting and wanting to talk to us as he wants to talk to the folks in Gahanna.
See, I think that, because Neola gave us options, right? And it was weekly, it was monthly, it was quarterly, it was yearly, I think. Quarter, semester, year.
Which is a surprise.
Right,
they
and
did
so when I think of, and I hear what you're saying, and I think that there are school districts who are pushing that. And I think that if, the state has to focus its resources on, certain places, it's going to be those school districts who are saying, once a month or once a year rather, or, once a semester and limit. I mean, we're still talking at once a month about 9 times a year.
It would be like 6 too, because, you're going to discount probably December. And so it would be, it wouldn't be much at all.
Why would you discount December?
Because you lose such a large chunk. Yeah, I mean, there's a high probability that over the course of the year, whatever day that would be, and I truly feel like we have to pick it. We would have to say it has to be some sort of level of predictability. But if you did it monthly, there would be either spring break or Christmas break or Thanksgiving. Do you know what I mean? Like it wouldn't, the calendar would not fall in a way that would result, and you wouldn't have May and you wouldn't have probably August. So it wouldn't result in a way that would have, I don't think, more than probably 6. But to the every other week piece, I think it is defensible. I am just very concerned that it is disruptive to teachers having to track it, thinking about days that, like months that have 5 weeks.
5 weeks, so.
That is
that
my
due
only
to-
concern, but I mean, I do think it's defensible.
So one thing I will say, the every other week, if it is, then it's Thanksgiving week. Then what do you do? What kind of, do you go to the next week? That's what makes it
makes it
confusing to me.
I mean, couldn't there be a calendar? We have an academic calendar. Everyone has calendars. Can't we just set a calendar, have the entity set a calendar a year in advance?
Yeah, you can.
And
then you calculate for weeks when the day of the week that they're not going to be there is a testing day so yeah, you have a calendar.
or you
It's
make
not
it
that complicated.
once a month, recognizing that there's breaks and there's testing and you find a date within that month. I don't know. I think that we're really complicating this, but.
So Kelly, I think the solution is that you have a set calendar. That, whatever entity, and candidly, if there's going to be more than one entity, if we end up going that path, there's going to need to be a calendar anyway. So it's probably a good practice for us to adopt up front.
And then who manages that calendar?
I think that is Trent's decision as to whether or not but it has to be done anyway, is what I'm saying. It doesn't matter if it's, that is a good practice to have, because unfortunately, this policy that we are required to have does not limit us to one entity per school or any school.
Right.
So
I
it is
understand
a
that.
good practice for us to adopt.
I just think when you add those extra variables, then we're asking our staff, which is what we're not supposed to do. We're not supposed to use staff resources. We're asking our staff to then accommodate for those variables. That would be the only thing.
We're already asking our staff to do tons.
But I do think this is more. They have to check the calendar. They have to chase down the kids that forgot that it was their day or whatever. I don't think that I don't think we can look at that and say it's not asking more.
I disagree. It's a calendar. You set a calendar. You have a set number of days. So we can agree to disagree. That's okay, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we have the discussion.
The other thing is this too section is an option.
Pardon?
Like, we don't have to put this in policy. It could be the direction of the superintendent decides. That we don't have to, if we don't come to a consensus, if we don't have an agreement, it's an option. It doesn't
No, I think
have
it
to
says
go
we
in our
have to
policy.
draft a policy.
No, she's
This
talking about that particular
section
Oh, I
is
gotcha.
an
I
option
see.
I'm sorry.
Frequency of it.
With
Yeah.
how
that
often.
we don't have to include.
Yeah.
And it could be, there are other policies that direct the superintendent to discern the timing.
Well,
That
Of course, you want to keep somehow put in the state testing because I think that's
Yeah.
vitally important. And
But
the 45 minutes, but I'm just saying like,
The piece of leaving, you would rescind it, but not put in up to the discretion of the superintendent, is that what you're saying? Or not rescind it, I'm sorry, not rescind
Not
it.
select that
Leave
option.
Not select that option, but not insert.
or select that option and not insert that language.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me ask it this way. I would never want the frequency to be more than once a week.
No, right.
We're all aligned on that. If feedback from our principals at our elementary level is that they can absolutely handle and is not a burden to go every other week, would you be comfortable if if Dr. Bauer is executed in that manner?
And how would it, yes, I think so. How would this read, or would we just not put that part in?
We would not
just
put that
not
part.
At all? We wouldn't say it's up to his
Correct.
discretion. We'd just leave that option off.
You can still say at the direction of the superintendent,
Yep.
as established by the superintendent.
So I don't dislike this, but let me talk, because this is new, right? So we got to think about all of
Sorry, that's what happens when you
No,
can't talk.
that's
any
okay.
other
No,
time.
no. That was not a complaint. That was a, like.
This is
let
what
me-
we're supposed to
This
do.
is-
Yes. Also, I'm a verbal processor, so there's that. So, but does that open us up to not screw, I mean, really, legal action, I guess is my question. Does that open us up to legal action if an entity said, but we want to do this every other, or every week, and then we as Dr. Bowers would then have to say, as a district, we're only going to allow you to do it every other week, if that was what they decided to do. Does that open us up? I mean, it would have to be, we'd have to treat every entity consistently, I guess.
Exactly. And it also gives us flexibility to the extent that there are multiple entities that come knocking on the door. Dr. Bowers?
Well, I mean, as I listened to the discussion, I'm more than happy to manage this. But I'm not sure I'm willing to manage this if the board is split on how I'm supposed to manage this.
That's why I asked the question. No,
So,
fully support that. That's why I asked the question. So I asked a very direct question of, if feedback from elementary administrators is that, the majority feedback is that it is not burdensome to them, it does not complicate the matters to the way, in a manner that they would not support every other week instead of every week, are we as a board comfortable with you executing in that manner? Because you have already consensus on, we wouldn't want to go more than once a week. So you would also then need a majority of the board to say that if the fear is not in actuality, would we be comfortable with every other week?
I guess I would want the authority for it to ebb and flow based on the organization and the school. Because I think it could be different based on,
The different buildings.
The different
Yeah,
buildings,
that's a-
different principals and how they manage.
With no more than once per week.
yeah, I mean, I'm very comfortable with how the policy is written right now. It's clear, no more than once per week. That's clear. They might not meet as much as once per week, but it can't be more than once per week. That's clear everywhere. If it's just delegated to me, no problem at all from my standpoint. But I do want the authority to navigate it because our 11 elementary schools are different places, different needs.
I'm comfortable with that.
And in all honesty, I'm comfortable with how it's written, but if we want to deviate from that, I am more comfortable with this because I am not in the classroom and not nearly as close to the classroom as you are, and I'm not comfortable making that decision for our teachers, and I trust you to have to make that decision because you do this every day, day in and day out, and I do not. So that would be, yeah.
No, you guys, I think that's a great resolution. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's a great landing.
I feel the same way. I'm most comfortable with this, but if we're going to take this out and give it to Trent to work with the buildings. If they end up with once a week or every other, whatever is best for them, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so we would then modify the language to say, released instruction time, shall be at the discretion of the superintendent and limited to no more than 1 day per school week? Something along those lines?
Yeah, and you know what we never
So-
did, you guys? Oh, no. The travel time needs to stay in,
We need to keep that 45 minutes.
inclusive of
Including
travel.
travel.
That needs to stay.
So we do still need this.
Yep. But Kelly,
Yes, I'm sorry,
that's
I
what
wasn't
Kelly
suggesting.
said.
Yeah, that's what I was just
Take it all
trying to
Yeah.
add
Yeah.
in the additional language.
Yeah.
Released time instruction shall be at the discretion of the superintendent and limited to no more than. We also could put in there, this is your call, or I'd love your feedback on this, Trent, may vary by building.
I don't think we want to put that into policy.
I'm just trying to look for something if
yeah, if
someone
somebody
comes
came
and
back.
says, but we're allowed to do X, Y, Z at
Yeah.
this school, why can't we do it here? But candidly, the at the discretion of the superintendent covers it. We do not
But-
have to get more specific than
I
that.
thought we couldn't do that at the discretion. So I'm not saying we can't do it, but I thought that, I'm back to,
So the law says we'll collaborate with the
Yeah.
religious release time organization. So, I mean, there is regardless of policy, there's
Yeah.
going to be a sit down and a collaboration and a conversation about what works for both entities.
okay.
And truly.
And that's in here, right? So do we?
I don't know if, I've gotten lost in the policy. I know it's in the law.
It's in the law, right? And I'd have to go back and look, Nikki, but I thought we asked about that, or I think I asked specifically about that language of at the discretion of the superintendent, and that was not,
Well, I think that what this does is that if you only had that, maybe that wasn't acceptable. I don't recall that, Stephanie. But I think that where we're checking the box that we need to is that we're not removing the language that creates the maximum here. It would be released time instruction shall be at the discretion of the superintendent and limited to no more than 1 days per school week as
Because my question would be, how would that be different
Yeah, that's
than
no
other
different.
policy that says, the direction of the superintendent? How would that be different than administrative guidelines? Like, we set policy, the superintendent in
No.
charge of operations.
I think you're right, Kelly. I actually don't think we have to add any additional language because
No, I think
when
we-
I paused, for everyone else who's not reading, the additional language then is as established by the superintendent.
Yep.
So I actually
I think that's
we're
right.
covered.
Yep, okay.
So Trent just needs to hear alignment from us.
Yeah.
That it can vary by building. Where if a principal desires and it's right for their building to be every other week, we're okay with that. And if not, it's no more than
Yeah.
once per week.
Yeah.
And I think we're all aligned that, we're going to defer to Dr. Bowers on kind of having that conversation with principals and.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Good
Okay.
discussion, guys. Didn't even land, I don't think any of us anticipated, but ironically, exactly as is written right here.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have just two things. One, we've talked a lot about this policy, right? And so there's a lot that is going into it. And so just making sure that we're all understanding how well-defined it is, the different, we talk about safety, right? And I do feel like it sets parameters around that. So I think that's good work. TJ, my question to you is, so this is the second read. Later in the meeting, it will be the motion to approve. Do we pull this out? when we get to that section, because there are amendments.
Yeah, no, I think
I guess there are no amendments.
There are no amendments.
My
There are no
only-
amendments.
my only notes say that we're striking the duplicative language on page 2 of 3
That's true.
in that particular
But that's a-
policy.
You're right.
But that's
And
not
that's a
substantive,
technical
so
error.
I think we're fine.
Okay,
Technical edit.
never mind, disregard.
We've just kind of confirmed our understanding of what this means, but we haven't changed the words.
And our alignment.
Yeah.
On the
Yep.
meaning behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do appreciate you checking with your record keeper, though.
Anytime, TJ, anytime.
Okay, so can we just make sure that we all know what we have in front of us? And that there aren't any other questions, because I know this was the biggest one that we wanted to talk about. But beyond that, did anybody have anything that they saw that we missed, that was an error or anything like that on any of the few that we have here?
I did not see anything else.
In the other policies or similarly
other-
the RTRI?
Sorry, the
Others.
other policies, but if we're still on RTRI, don't let me kick you out of that. I did not mean to.
No.
I did not mean to speed us ahead.
So I did, with the cell phone policy, Trent mentioned in one of the key communicators sessions, and I had missed this when I was going through all of the legislative stuff, but I guess as part of the budget, and Trent, maybe you can speak to this better than I can, it's a provision in there that there's a no cell phone policy. I'm probably not doing that justice. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, I don't know if I can say it any better. I mean, one of the, the budget is the budget, but it also obviously is chock full of policy pieces. And one of the pieces that was proposed was no cell phones K-12 except for in the case of an IEP or a 504. We have policy on deck as a second reading that codifies our current policy. The question Amber asked is, should we pause that and wait and see what happens with the budget?
Should we table it? Because we
Yeah,
don't have
table
to
it.
pass it until July.
I would
think,
probably
for this
pass
one.
it, so we have it, because who knows if whether that stays in the budget bill
Right.
or not. There obviously is a level of frustration throughout the state of Ohio that we all just went through local processes to create policy, did
Yeah.
a lot of surveying. I do, for the most part, feel good with where we are right now in this policy. But if you do pass it tonight, it is possible that we have to go back and change that this summer if that remains in the budget process.
So that was my only question. Do we
Yeah.
potentially table this until we figure out what the budget's gonna look like? Or like Trent said, do we just pass it now with the expectation that possibly we have to revisit this in a few months? Yeah.
I'm
Just a
comfortable.
question.
I'm comfortable passing it because even though we don't normally do policy many, many times a year, we're gonna have a couple things that we're gonna have to pass for July anyway. So, we might as well do this. This is what we want, and then we'll see what we might have to tweak given the budget.
Yeah, I'm comfortable as well. And thanks for making sure we were all aware that that's in the
I actually
pending
didn't know
budget.
that little, I did not.
I didn't either.
I did not know that either.
Yeah, he mentioned that and I was like, oh, I missed that. I guess, when you're looking at
Yeah.
what is it, 800
Yeah.
some page budget bill, you miss things. So,
Okay.
and the AI bill or the AI policy, I think looks good. I like that we struck the specifics. So I'm good with everything else.
Along those lines, real fast though, right before where we strike the uses, it should say district approved AI tools, period. And then for the following uses. Is that the technical things that you will be able to strike later on? Okay,
What number are you on?
I'm sorry. This is the same, the AI policy 7540.04 on page 4. Right above the blue that we struck out, all of those uses. Teachers have the discretion to authorize students to use district-approved AI tools, period.
Yeah, good catch.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. Everything else looks good to me, so. Thank you guys for that. I mean, that's a lot of work that you guys put in. So I really appreciate that. And that recommendation for a vote will come later in our meeting.
And I would just like to say out loud, even though she's not here, thank you to Tracy for trying to follow all of our many, many caveats as we go down 5,000 directions on this packet of policy, so.
Yes, very much so. She does a lot of work with that. Okay, our next agenda item is Superintendent's Report. Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. So our mission in Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. We work to do that through 4 vision statements, and so we set this report up through those vision statements. Our first vision statement is we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. We were recently asked the question, is it true that Lexia is going away at the elementary level? So that was a good question. As Worthington Schools transitions to CKLA, English Language Arts Curriculum, which we had an update on at our last board meeting, Lexia will be phased out and replaced with Boost Reading. Like Lexia, Boost is an adaptive online learning platform that tailors instructions to each student's skill level based on their responses. So while Boost is not a substitute for direct reading instruction, it serves as a valuable supplemental resource available for both the classroom and at home. So it replaces Lexia and is aligned with the CKLA curriculum. So Boost will replace Lexia. Our second vision statements, we will provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. As you know, last week, Worthington Schools suffered a tragic loss of Kilbourne Middle School teacher Colleen Snyder, who passed away unexpectedly on Wednesday evening. Colleen was in her 18th year as a teacher in Worthington. From 2007 to 2016, she taught at Evening Street, both 4th and 6th grade. From 2016 until present day, she taught at Kilbourne Middle School as a math teacher, originally in 6th grade, but moving both to 7th and 8th grade. So we want to just say publicly that our thoughts are with Colleen's family and her teammates at Kilbourne Middle School. So our third vision statements will provide consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. This week, the district will be holding the 2025 virtual State of the Schools, and you'll be able to follow along on all of your social media channels. Over the next 5 days, we'll be sharing the stories of our students and staff as we highlight the portrait of a learner that guides our teaching and learning. You'll see videos about student newscasts, elementary and high school collaborations, school safety, innovative classes, new podcasts, all-day kindergarten, high school student academics, and much, much more. Today was day 1. We released 3 videos today. Those will all move to our website as well, so if you missed any of those videos and want to check out the State of the Schools page on the website, you'll be able to do that. And tomorrow is another day with 3 or 4 more videos. So we're excited. Our communications team has done a great job on that. Our fourth vision statements will be responsible and transparent with our community's resources. We have talked a lot about the governor's newly released budget proposal, which outlines state funding for public schools over the next 2 years. While we know this is just a proposal, as it stands, it has a negative impact on Worthington schools. One of the questions we get a lot is around rising home values. And so while home values may be rising, Worthington Schools does not receive significant additional revenue from reappraisals because of an Ohio law called House Bill 920. This law prevents schools from collecting more money when property values go up. Yet, unfortunately, the state still assumes we can afford to contribute more, leading to a funding reduction. So this issue is part of a larger trend in school funding. Over time, decisions at the state level have shifted more of the burden onto local taxpayers. Some key factors include the loss of the tangible personal property tax, which once provided a major source of funding for schools, almost 25% of Worthington Schools' budget at one time. The restrictions of House Bill 920, which prevent school funding from increasing with property values. And then unfortunately, the current fair school funding model does not reflect today's education costs as it's being put forward. So as the state budget process continues, it's important for our community to stay informed about how these decisions impact our schools. Advocating for fair funding ensures that Worthington receives its fair share, one that reflects the true costs and realities of providing the high-quality education to students that we all expect. President Davis, that is my report.
Thank you, Dr. Bowers. Does anyone have any questions or comments about Dr. Bowers' report? Okay, moving on to the treasurer's report. TJ.
Thank you. It's very hard to follow a superintendent's report that is full of financial information. But I will and briefly just touch on a couple points. You know, we continue to monitor this process. I will say kudos to our board who has been actively engaging our lawmakers, whether that's behind the scenes through emails, through this resolution tonight and drafting that, or also especially thankful to Ms. Harless for testifying in person and subjecting herself to the dreaded cross-examination questions that come, but she did a very good job, I thought. What I would say is, remember, we're only one of 39 districts that are growing and losing money. And by my tally, if I add up those 39 districts, they're losing about $27 million over the 2 years. I also looked at Ohio's February financial report, and it shows a surplus of over $400 million. So to be clear, we're not asking that they increase taxes to maintain our funding. They clearly have enough money to do that, and that is what we are asking. We're also keeping an eye on independent bills that were introduced in the Senate regarding property taxation in general. There's a lot of focus on what they call the 20 mil floor. As Trent mentioned, we are not one of those districts, but if you are at the 20 mil floor, about 2/3 of the districts across the state are, and they get growth from reappraisal. And so there's a lot of focus on the Senate to change what makes up the 20 mil floor, what levies count toward the 20 mil floor. We're told that any property tax changes would be standalone, not part of the budget. But it's hard for me to imagine when things get down to the wire in June if deals aren't struck. And so we'll keep an eye on it. We'll keep an eye on that process as that heads until June. The District Insurance Committee met last week. We reviewed the full calendar year of claims data that we had for 2024. No surprises. We finished with a loss ratio of 106.4%. So anything above 100% means we spent more than we took in, which we try not to do. And so we knew that in the fall, and that's why we increased insurance premium 6%. The first 2 months of this year, things are going okay, but it's early, but we'll continue to monitor that. On tonight's agenda are the annual rates and amounts required to be approved, which starts the process of setting tax rates for 2026. It's a long process. This is the first step. 2026 represents the last increment of our 2022 incremental levy, and then the tax collections start to flatten out. Just to be clear, the rates listed on tonight's agenda are the gross rates, the full rates. The actual effective rates are currently about half of what you see on the agenda, and that again is because of House Bill 920. And then lastly, to all of my mental health specialists and licensed social workers that are near and dear to my heart, happy Social Worker Month. That's all.
Thank you, TJ. Does anyone have any questions for TJ? Okay. Moving on to board committee reports and announcements. I don't like to call on people. Go for it.
Mine is really short, so I'll go first. Literally, the only thing I had was a student listening session on the 27th, and I was sick. So thank you for covering for me, Kelly. Just grateful that we have the resolution in front of us for tonight related to pending House Bill 96. So thank you for putting that together. Yeah.
I can go next. It's been kind of a busy couple weeks for me. Had a couple student feedback sessions at Kilbourne and Thomas. Just great group of students, and just really enjoyed hearing from them and appreciate their communication and engagement there. Key communicators had internal and external, and I think everything that Trent discussed with us, he kind of touched on with that group, but that group was also interested in some of the other things that are happening, which I have a little bit in my legislative update, just, related to the new restroom law and DEI and the federal budget and the federal funding and what the elimination of the Department of Education means. And it was a good discussion. So appreciate those community members who engage with those groups and bring great questions to the table, I think, and really lead a great discussion that I think guides the work we do here for sure. The WEA had this was just kind of fun, it was a partnership with Read Across America last weekend. It was for the community. It was free family fun, and it was just a really well-attended event, and was great to see that organization out in the community and all the kids having so much fun. And so that was kind of fun. That was at the Worthington Community Center. I didn't think we were ever going to get Henry out of there. He wanted to stay way past the time it was over. He had a lot of fun. I talked about the marching band registration meeting and the oohs and ahs. That was real, and that was just so exciting to see that real-time reaction to the plans that with the construction. And then the Worthington Honors Band, which is our middle schools from all of our buildings, and they all have a single day to perform, and it's just this fantastic display of the talent that we have here in our district. So that happened. And did you have something you were going to?
Oh, let's wait till you're finished, and then I was going to
I
ask.
was just going to jump into the legislative stuff if you
Go ahead.
are ready for that. And it's just high level because we could really spend hours and hours here. There's a lot of bills that are moving, a lot of bills that are being introduced. A lot of them are related to public education. I'm not going to give an entire list of them because a lot of them are simply being introduced and they're not going anywhere. The budget is the main focus. The timeline I will share because I just think this is helpful to kind of keep in mind as we go forward as to where it is in the legislative process. So it's in the House right now. It's in the Finance Committee. They're having hearings tomorrow and the rest of the week, 10:30 a.m. If you want to go in person, it's room 313. But so if you want to tune into those, that'll be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week, the hearings. And then the amendments are due to the chair on the 14th. And so that's not the end of the process. You know, it still goes through the floor vote, and there are amendments that can happen there too. And then it will go over to the Senate. They're wanting to take some time off for spring break in the House, so they're looking to pass the House version around April 9th is what they're shooting for. It's an ambitious timeline, really. I mean, there's a lot they've got to get in that time, but that's what they're looking at. And then in the Senate, they'll hear testimony from the state agencies beginning March 31st into April 11th, and then it will go to Senate Ed from the 28th to the 16th, public testimony in Senate Finance the week of the 26th of May, and they're thinking they're going to vote the budget out of the Senate June 12th. So it's, you know, it's before the deadline, and it's a quick timeline, but that's sort of, you know, what we're looking at. So I think as far as advocacy, you know, we've still got some opportunities here to, you know, make our voices heard. I know that, you know, we've been doing some things with the House, but then we can shift our focus to the Senate, to the full House, whatever we have to do. But I think that it's worth fighting for that funding for our community. Also, just a heads up, I don't even know if registration is still open, but on Tuesday, March 18th, they have the OSBA has the state legislative conference. I went to this last year. I'm registered again to go this year. It's just a half day. It's from 8:30 to 1. It's at the athletic club. Senator Brenner's going to be there, Rep. Phil Robinson, and Rep. Sarah Fowler Arthur. And they just have some really good panel discussions on just sort of where the legislature's headed this General Assembly. And so I don't know, like I said, if registration is still available, but it was helpful to me last year, and I'm looking forward to going this year. I can share whatever happens with you all when I get back. OSBA shared a lot of resources for advocacy related to the budget. If you saw the facts in the flash for the week of March 3rd, it's in your inbox. I can forward it around if you want me to again. But it was letter templates, it was budget priorities and requests, info to share with legislators. So if you know, in your conversations that you're having, I think those are a lot of really helpful resources. Some legislation seeing movement that I'll just flag. Senate Bill 113 has only seen sponsor testimony so far, but it's a bill from Senator Brenner. That's the one that prohibits diversity, equity, and inclusion in public schools. Given that he is the sponsor and he's also the chair of the Senate committee, I suspect that we will see some movement on that one, but we'll see. And then Senate Bill 34 That's seen sponsor testimonies as well as proponent. That's requiring public school boards to select at least one of the bill's listed historical documents to display in each classroom. That has to be done by July 1st, 2026 if it passes. It's scheduled for a third hearing tomorrow, so it's moving pretty quick. And the proponents for that, the Family Research Council and the Christian Business Partnership, the different documents that it requires school districts to display in every single room is the Mayflower Compact, Declaration of Independence, Northwest Ordinance, 10 Commandments, Magna Carta, Bill of Rights, U.S. Constitution, Articles of Confederation, the mottos of the U.S. and Ohio. And there's something in there too about permitting a school to erect a monument if it's donated. I didn't really get into the weeds with that one, but there's something in there also about requiring schools to determine, if they accept those donations or displays. And House is on the floor Wednesday, Senate's off next week, Senate's off until next week. TJ already mentioned that Senate Bill 66, which I think is looking like that might be the vehicle for property tax reform. So that's just kind of some high level. There's a lot more, but that's just some things to sort of have on your radar. And that's all I have.
Can I just ask you a question about the legislative thing with OSBA that you went to last year? So I read that, and it said it recommended that you go meet with your representatives in the afternoon. Did you do that, or was that but you still got a lot out of it just going in the morning?
I did, and
Okay.
you have the opportunity because everyone has assigned seating, and they have lawmakers at some of the tables.
Okay.
And, you can get up and move around the room and
Yeah.
talk to people. But I don't remember having any heavy conversations last year. I had been in office all of 3 months, so I think I walked around and introduced myself
Yeah.
to some people I didn't know, but I didn't get into any.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have any.
I was going to message separately that I was going to plan to go. Do you want to join us too?
I'm going to try to go, and I'm
Okay.
leaving on
It's just
spring
the
break
morning.
next day,
Okay.
so I need to make sure I'm not overcommitting myself. But
I hear you.
Yeah, it was a good use of time, I thought.
Thank you, Amber. I appreciate you sharing that information. It's a lot. It is a lot. All right, go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay, so no one gave updates the last time, but I don't think there was a bunch of things that I didn't update, because the main thing that we had done prior to last meeting was curriculum liaison council, and we saw that. So no update needed there, other than I think everybody in the room had really good questions, and all the parents were really engaged in not just the content, but the ideas behind it, and I really appreciate them coming and giving that amount of time and being really thoughtful about their responses, and then of course bringing that information back to their districts. So I do appreciate that. I've been to a couple student feedback sessions. The first of the second round that I went to was at Thomas in February, and that one was a little quiet. And after that one, it was very, very quiet. But after that one, we kind of changed format and moved to smaller group discussion. And so I thought that was really helpful. And all of the kids seemed to engage. Everybody kind of participated, whereas normally we have a couple kids that, maybe aren't comfortable talking in a large group. So I was really appreciative of that. We had some good feedback, always some interesting conversations around cell phones. Although I truly think that across all of the sessions that I've been to, at least when we talk about cell phones, nobody's pushing back saying, well, we should have them all the time. I think some of them would like to have them more. I'm married to my cell phone, so I can't say anything, but I think they do actually appreciate the kind of the structure that we're putting in place. So maybe we adults need that as well a little bit. What was I going to say? Oh, the only other thing I would say about the feedback sessions is I really do like the change, and I appreciate that we have the opportunity to go and listen to students talk about their experiences. I feel like I'm missing a piece where we kind of communicate back to the kids kind of what changes, or we make, not that we have to change necessarily, but what we do with the information in what feels like just such a short amount of time. And I know we're kind of married to the class schedule, so it is what it is. But just something that I kind of want to think about how we communicate that back to kids or how that is communicated back. Otherwise, The big thing that that I did, but since the last meeting, was our safety committee meeting, which Kelly and I are on the safety committee. And it was the first one that we've had, so we kind of had a lot of level setting to do. It was great. I enjoyed all the information. I thought it was really helpful. I will share my notes, and then I know Kelly will fill in the blanks, just so that everybody that isn't sitting at this table knows we have representation from across the districts and administrators, and then people from the WEC, representation from the WEC, and then Kelly and I are on there as well. But we talked about everything from how we handle our cameras. We have about 800 cameras around the district in schools, just, to make sure that we know that our kids are safe, they're internal and external. And so we talked about even just things that I don't think about, but getting those all on the same platform allows us to be more consistent, and allows us to be able to see, like, if kids go from, my kids go to Worthington Estates, and Worthing Way is right down the street, so we can kind of track kids if something were to happen, or we could track somebody if something were to happen. We talked about the safety buckets, which we've all seen, I think probably somewhere, that are in every classroom. That have just a lot of really useful stuff for many, many, many things, even if, somebody accidentally puts their hand through a pane of glass at a track meet. So that was helpful, and of course AEDs, but going forward, one of the things that we'll be able to bring back to the table are more specific things. So one of the things that we talked about was like data security, which is a big deal. We talked about that being a future topic. We didn't talk about data security, but obviously internally, externally, that's just a big part of our world, and something that is a safety issue. I did really like how you talked about what safety is. So I don't want to try to repeat it. So I'm hoping when you go that you will talk about that, because one of the reasons that we wanted to have this committee is that safety is, we think of it sometimes as a very small piece, but really it encompasses everything, every building across our district, everything that we do, from our administration to our teachers to our students, everything. So it's a big piece, and I won't say any more because I want you to talk about what you said there. So the last piece I will say, I am really excited that we are going to have Centegics in all our buildings no later than the start of the next school year. And we've gotten some grants that will help offset some of that cost. So that's awesome as well, to not have to absorb all of that cost and to make things safer. So, and I didn't realize, I thought this was very interesting. You may all know this, I did not. There's a sequence of button pushes that you can push on Centegic that keeps it internal. And so you can alert internally that help is needed, and they know where you are in the building. And one of the explanations, the values that we talked about there, was there are instances where calling somebody on a walkie-talkie would escalate that for a kid. And so being able to push the button 3 times silently and have people come in knowing where they are and knowing kind of probably what the situation is really, really helpful. And then obviously there's the external alert that sends in the cavalry. So I thought that was really cool. I think that's it.
Do you want to follow up with the safety, Kelly, since we're on there? Want me to go? Okay. My reports are from, a couple weeks ago, because we didn't do them at the last meeting. And as Stephanie said, a lot of them we have talked about. But mid-February, we had our AAPL subcommittee led by Angie. And we talked about AI, which was great, and it helped with our policy discussion because our team is embracing AI. So our kids will be able to know how to use it and be better prepared for the world after school. So I was glad to have that discussion and hear how that team is embracing that. On February 12th, I was able to go to the Peace Ambassador program at Granby because Kelly has spoken so highly of it. And I just have to say, our third graders ask the greatest questions. They're not shy, they ask questions, and our high school students were very able to answer them. So it was all really good. They do little skits for the kids, and they may do something that's a little concerning and ask the kids what they thought, and the kids had great answers, and then they go back and maybe show the way it should have been. And what I didn't realize, the project is all funded by and organized by the Worthington Interfaith Neighbors Group. So I really want to publicly thank them for doing this program with our students. The high school students are from Kilbourne, but they go to all of our elementary schools. So if you ever have a chance, it's great. I don't know, it's like 20 minutes to stop into school and see what's going on. Student meeting at Thomas, February 18th, and they weren't very talkative, but they seem to be fine with the cell phone policy, and fine with the construction, and liked the variety of extracurricular activities we have. CLC at Park, Stephanie talked about that, and we talked about it last week. And then student meeting at Worthington Academy on February 20th, and that was wonderful. Every student talks, and they're happy to be there, and I'm very happy that we are able to provide that opportunity for our students that need it. So that was a great experience. And that is all I have. I'm very interested in the OSBA legislative update after you talk about it, Amber, and what happens, because I thought it was just maybe somebody giving us an update, but I have a work obligation that day, but I'm going to see what I can do. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm very excited that you went to the Peace Ambassadors.
Yeah,
Very
very
excited
fun.
about that. So I'm glad you got to experience that. No pressure, anyone that hasn't been already. A couple of things I want to touch on, some of the things that we skipped last time just because, we were going late. So I can talk about this because Black History happens every day. So even though this happened during Black History Month, it's March, and it's still Black History time. So I went to the Black History Month program that was put on by Thomas and Kilbourne, and it was a joint effort, which was the first time that they've done that. So that was really exciting. It was powerful, emotional. It was a great celebration, and they did a fantastic job. And so I love that they said that this is the first annual. And there's already been some feedback given from the two different organizations that put that together, as well as some of the advisors and the principals have given feedback. And they got a lot of community response to it. So just a really good, enthusiastic event. I'm excited to attend that again next year. Student feedback sessions were great. I did actually go to quite a few more than usual, but it's just rarely does my schedule allow for that, but I was able to fill in for Nikki that one time, and that was great. I went to the one that Stephanie mentioned at, I won't say the name of the school. So when we're in a circle, right, and so it was a little bit more challenging, but something that Kelly said as she facilitated that group was, we're getting the highlights, right, but we're also getting, it could be better if. So you said not change, but yeah, also, what are some suggestions? How could we be doing things better to make your experience the best that it can be? Worthington Academy was amazing too, because that group, every student did speak. And I don't want to say they were fighting over who's going to talk next, but there was not a gap in conversation during that time. And Jeff Maddox was able to share his involvement in the start of Worthington Academy. So that was good to hear, and I think it was good for students to hear. So that was good, and like Stephanie said, and that there was some change up in some small groups, and I think that facilitated good conversation in those feedback sessions. What I will say is I know Dr. Bauer sent an email asking for our feedback about the student feedback sessions. So as we start those up again in the fall, if you have any suggestions, make sure you let him know so he can pass that down to Emily. State Peak Committee, glad that we're getting that started. Stephanie talked about its representation from all over the district. So we have, from an elementary level, middle school level, high school level, here at the Worthington Education Center, we have IT that's helping as we have the cyber conversations, which is really good. And we did talk about the different levels of safety. A lot of people think about physical safety, but it's mental health safety, it's emotional safety, it's peer safety, right? Like connection safety, food insecurity safety, all of those things make up our students' experience, our staff's experience here. So that was really good. So I thought it was a really productive meeting. I think Jeff did a good job leading it and giving us what are our practices now? Like, what are we doing now? So we have a foundation and just a base of what to know, of what to talk about. And then all the things that Stephanie said in her notebook, because I love it. Then I went to internal, external key communicators. I don't think that I have anything additional than what Amber talked about. We did have a good conversation. I do love that thought exchange. I do really appreciate that people can, submit questions anonymously, because sometimes it's you have to be brave sometimes to say things out loud. And so I do think that it helps engage the conversation, and I think it was really receptive. And I think you gave good feedback, and TJ gave good feedback because we talked about funding in the budget. So that's it. That's all I have.
Kelly?
Yes.
May I add just
You
one
can.
thing? Sometimes it's funny, like, I'm sure you can relate to this, or several of us can. When you attend as a parent, you forget you're viewing things as a school board as well. So I'll just give a shout out to everyone who performed in Thomas Worthington's performance of Shrek, which was fantastic. Also to both the Kilbourne and Thomas choirs who performed at OMEA this past Friday. And then was also to the Thomas Worthington High School Orchestra and Choir who performed last week as well. And if I may share one thing that was on the back of the Shrek, not flyer, what am I trying to say, program, thank you. It included Why Teach Theater in Schools. And I won't read the whole thing, but very quickly, theater is science, theater is mathematical, it's a performing language, it's history, it's physical education, it's language arts, it's business, it's economics. Theater is taught in schools not because you're expected to major in theater, not because you're expected to perform all through life, not so you can relax or you can have fun, but so you will recognize beauty, so you will be sensitive, so you will be closer to an infinite beyond this world, so you will have more love, more compassion, more gentleness, more good, in short, more life. I thought that was very powerful and spot on. Thanks for letting me share.
I love that. I love our theater programs and our music programs are just great. Finding a place for students to connect, right? Have something for everyone. Okay, I'm lost here. Let's go. We are moving on to actions recommended by the treasurer, routine business. Mr. Cusick.
Thank you. I would like to recommend that the board approve the minutes from the February 24th meeting as presented in enclosure E1, please.
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any questions or comments about the minutes? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the appropriations modifications as contained in the agenda. They are some cross-object appropriations that net to zero in the general fund, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions, comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes. Motion carries. Item F, actions recommended by the treasurer, new business.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the board approve the resolution accepting initial rates and amounts as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor for tax year 25, collection year 26, as indicated in enclosure F1.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? That was
This
a
is
lot.
something we just have to do every year, correct?
Yeah, this is the first step. Then we certify these to the County Budget Commission, and they eventually will adopt them and send them back to us.
TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to item G, personnel consent agenda. Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. That's items G2 through G11. Items G2 through G11, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions about the consent agenda? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes,
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
motion carries. Item H, actions recommended by the superintendent, new business.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H1, which is the acceptance of the donations that are listed on your agenda. H1, please.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes,
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H2. Item H2 is the annual resolution authorizing membership in the Ohio High School Athletic Association, this time for year 25-26.
So moved?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis,
Yes,
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H3. That's the recommended motion to accept the base bid for the parking lot here at the WEC this summer. Item H3, please.
So moved?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes. Okay, moving on to item I, actions recommended by the Board of Education. May I please have a I recommend a motion to, no, why is it, I'm sorry, my computer is off. This is technology happening. Okay, there we go. It took a little bit of time to update. I apologize. No, it is. Hold on just a moment. There we go. May I please have a motion to approve the policy updates recommended by Neola and miscellaneous policy revisions as presented for first reading at the February 24th, 2025 regular board meeting?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any other questions or additions? TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes,
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
motion carries. Okay, now we're at the portion of the meeting I'm going to recommend a motion to approve the resolution opposing House Bill 96 and its impact on state funding for Worthington schools as indicated in enclosure I-2. So you were initially given the resolution proposal that Vicki and her team put together. And then I did look at it in conjunction with TJ, and so you also have in front of you a secondary suggestions of adding to that resolution.
So we need to,
So I apologize ahead of time for that it only came to you today.
no, that's okay. We have to vote, or not vote, but somebody needs to motion, right? And then talk. Yeah.
Okay, so I asked for the motion. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you, TJ. There's been a motion, or there's been a first and a second. Oh, my goodness. Is there any conversation, suggestions, comparison of the two documents? Okay, so TJ highlighted the updated document
Yeah.
to show the new language. And I will just tell you, the language that I added into the resolution was basically to just give a background of what the fair school funding, the process that it went through, why we're advocating for that. I feel like a little bit of history would be helpful there. So that was that information that was added there.
I think that's good because even though we live and breathe this stuff, not everyone in the world or everyone that will read this sees that, which, so I think the background information is helpful to give context to why we are opposing it. And thank you to everybody that worked on this. I do think it's kind of as TJ alluded to earlier, I think it's important that we consistently carry this message forward from multiple angles in any way that we can. So I did have a question about why we struck. So I'm looking at the highlighted piece.
Okay.
And on the highlighted, I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to make sure. On the first page, we struck, whereas the proposed funding calculations rely on outdated cost figures from 2022. My assumption is that was struck because we are not necessarily advocating for reinstating those fully. Our position as the Worthington Board of Education is that the proposed model is inappropriately or inaccurately calculating our overall district's wealth. And in so doing, dropping us to that 10% floor that is causing the issue with the fair, is causing us the issue with the loss of the 2.2 million in the first 2.2 million period. Is that a fair assessment?
So the reason I struck that out is because it says it up in the, so.
Oh, okay.
It's the fourth highlighted paragraph. However,
Okay.
the governor's, it's worded a little differently.
yeah.
It kind of says the same thing.
Oh,
And
but
so
it's,
the only
okay, it's up
reason
there.
that I took
Okay,
that
so
out
that's
of
it there. That's fine.
Yeah.
Because I wondered that too.
I'm
when
fine
it
with
got
that,
struck.
yeah.
Okay.
I just got one typo in the fourth whereas clause, which amounted to 1/3 of the cost of full implementation.
Oh, yeah.
I can't hear you. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
It's a-
The fourth whereas clause, it should state which amounted to 1/3 of the cost of full implementation of the plan. It's just a typo.
Okay.
See.
Yes, thank you, not cot.
Yeah.
It looks like in the last highlighted on that page one, we need to decide between will and may.
So the original language that I saw, so I did look at some other examples, right? Said will require. And I guess I just didn't know if we wanted to say that absolute.
I like
I don't know.
may. I mean, because we just don't know what, I don't know.
Yep, that was my thinking.
I'm not wedded to it, that's my knee jerk.
I support May as well.
Okay.
I
Me
do
too.
too. We could consider language that would, I don't want to, I know. I'm going to say it anyway. We could consider language that would indicate that it will make us more reliant on our community for funding.
Okay.
Because it will regardless, right? It's
Absolutely.
changing the equation. So maybe that's the route that we want to go. Or maybe we add that somewhere in here. I think that's an important piece, like.
It could be another whereas after
Yeah.
that, because, so I'm looking at, so Kelly and I sent a letter to the House Finance Committee, and there's something in here that says, Worthington relies on its, I'll just read the whole paragraph and we can maybe pull some of it, because I think it would address what you're trying to say there. Worthington relies on its local community for 80% of its funding. Our residents have historically supported the district at the ballot box. However, they expect these requests to be reasonable in terms of size and interval. Recognizing this, we have assured our community that we're financially stable enough to remain off ballot until 2028, 2 years later. It kind of goes on, but I mean, I think if we, because I think that's significant that our residents have historically supported this.
Yeah.
And, I don't know.
So I agree with that language and like that language. The direction that I'm going is it changes the percentage of our overall budget that has to come from the local level, right? So if if we have a pie, if we don't change the amount of funding in the pie and we lose some from the state, then the district residents have to, even if even if we don't initially charge them more, that percentage increases.
And we're also faced with potentially loss
And
of
that.
federal funding.
Yes,
So I
correct.
think that
Yes.
should be in here too.
Which may trickle down to the state, but we'll talk about that later.
Right. Because that's not really addressed in here.
Right.
But I think that's a real, that's why we're fighting so hard at the state level, because we've got also the potential to lose funds at the federal level as well.
Yeah. So I'm comfortable passing this with, if we just add some language about that, obviously we need to pass this tonight. And say that we are signing it since we won't have an opportunity to discuss again.
So
That's
just-
my, I mean, this is great.
Okay. Just to recap, for that it changes the percentage, and I can, TJ's listening too, and so he and I can have a conversation about what that
Yeah.
wording exactly looks like and get the essence of it.
Yep.
And that should be a separate whereas, you're
Yes.
saying? Okay,
And I agree that it should be May.
okay.
We could also recognize too that the state auditor was just here recognizing the district for fiscal responsibility, an award that's given to fewer than 4% of Ohio's 4,200 public entities. I mean, I think if we're making, giving this background information about how we got here and who we are in the equation.
Okay. Do you have an idea where you would put that whereas just?
I would put it, when you start talking about Worthington after, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We had talked about after the 2.2 million in state funding in the first year, after that whereas, going into, what Stephanie was saying about, although I'm getting lost in this a little bit too. I don't know, maybe it's after has experienced stable or increasing student enrollment.
Okay.
Maybe it's not important, I don't know,
No, that's important.
or it
4%.
could be, therefore be it resolved. Let's see. No, I think it's a whereas.
Yeah, I like it after the increasing enrollment section. And I'll just take that from the letter that we
I was gonna
sent.
say, we had a paragraph in
Take the
here.
wording.
It's the second paragraph in that letter about that.
I feel like there was something else you said, Amber, too, another suggestion that you had besides the auditor.
I think that was it. I mean, I said something earlier about how our residents have historically supported this, but everybody has a limit.
Okay.
I'm paraphrasing, but
Got
it's
it.
that paragraph.
Well, that's a good
paragraph in the letter
Okay.
about reasonable levies.
Nikki or Jennifer, do you have any other additions or questions? Again, I apologize that it just got to your desk today.
No, it's good.
No,
I
that's-
appreciate
that's
the
okay.
initiative.
Yeah, the kind of the history and the information is helpful.
Okay.
Because I'll say, I usually would prefer these to be one page so someone can quickly read it, but this issue is so complicated that I appreciate the background information here.
Okay. So, TJ, am I making a motion to amend the resolution? So I'm just gonna make it. I'm gonna make the motion to amend the resolution, including the proposed changes that we received today, which will include language about the percentage change and language about the letter from the auditor, or the recognition from the auditor. Is that all I have to say? Okay. So that is a motion.
So moved. Do you need that? You're me. Second.
Are there any questions about that?
No.
TJ, will you please call for the vote?
So the vote on the amended motion, Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes,
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner?
Yes.
Ms. Harless?
Yes.
When it's sent out, we'll let you know. TJ will let you know.
Yep.
Okay.
You gotta vote
Yeah.
on the,
We have to vote on the motion as amended.
yes.
Correct.
I don't make the rules. Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes,
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
I appreciate TJ so much. Okay. Thank you, guys.
TJ, will it say something at the back where you all sign it that it was approved unanimously?
Yeah, we can put a treasurer
That
certification.
you put something in there, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now, are there any requests, questions, concerns from the board? All right. Moving on to calendar, we will see each other again very soon on Wednesday, March 12th at 1 o'clock for our work session, where we will continue our conversation about goals and finalize those goals for the Board of Education. And then on April, then we have a long break because of spring break. We will not have a second March business meeting. So our next meeting will be Monday, April 14th, here in this room, where we will talk about or get a presentation regarding portrait into practice. We're very excited about that. And then Monday, April 28th, we will have a meeting here again at 6:30 about student behavior and mental health update. So that will be really exciting. All right, may I please have a motion to enter into executive session to consider the employment, dismissal, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee?
So moved.
Second,
TJ, will you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best,
yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes,
Mrs. Epling Skinner,
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
motion carries. Okay, thank you guys for joining us.